bambino pensi che l'universo ruoti intorno a te. Pensi che sarai sempre protetto e al sicuro. Poi, un giorno, ti rendi conto che non è così. Perché quando sei solo come un bambino, i mostri ti vedono più debole. E non ti accorgi che si avvicinano. No! Finché non è troppo tardi.
Tieni, prendi.
When in September 1986 it made its debut on the American bookshelves, Stephen King, a hail genius of international literature, had not yet 40 years old, but he was one of the most best-known writers who had already signed 22 books. He, born in Portland in 1947, is one of the most famous of fantasy literature, particularly horror. It has become an authentic mass phenomenon and the greatest bestseller of the year in America. It's about a novel that the writer began in September 1981 and where from the first to the second chapter not only does a chronological jump of 27 years, but it's also told like a succession of splinters of life lived by different characters. Thereof, the murder clown is one of the most scarier characters of cinema and literature, born from the pen of Stephen King. According to many, the writer would be guided to the dates of a criminal really existed, whose name was John Wayne Gacy, a murderer who killed 23 young girls and boys between 16 and 21 years old only for the sheer pleasure and fun. Unlike what can be believed, Gacy was a businessman, a successful politician, a family man, and furthermore, he was very welcomed by the whole of the community. Quite frequently, he dressed up as a clown to entertain children at parties, and even he visited them to the hospital. In 1972, he began to spread death and fear, killing several of his workers, and so young guys to which had promised a job. In 1978, he made a mistake with one of his last victims, and so he catched the police's suspicion on him. Later, he was persecuted and sentenced to death. This romance is about the story of 7 young children from a fictitious city of Derry in Maine. All began one full day during a huge flood that hit a small town, flooding the roads. For little Georgie the Brow was the right time to try the paper boat that his brother Bill did for him with love. He had fun pursuing the small boat, but at some point it goes in a gutter. Georgie bends down to pick up it, but he has an unfortunate encounter.
Georgie?
Bill, with his friends Richie, Eddie, Stan, Beverly, Mike, and Ben, start search the clown. They found out later, at their own expense, that Pennywise is the incarnation of the bad soul of the Derry city, and that every 27 years return to surface to it. The first chapter of it, shot by Andy Muschietti and much appreciated by the writer, from the beginning has been proposed as a version extremely loyal to the romance, settled in the 80s instead in 50s. Muschietti's movie does an ordinary job on fear and focuses on how the guys interact and impatient of small gestures. It's able to find in his film the joke, hate, anger, thanks to the work done by his amazing cast. The horror of King doesn't seem to originate from fears and phobias, but from the writer's hate towards certain human behaviors. Compared to Hit of the 90s, the Pennywise of Bill Skarsgård is more terrifying, with his sudden appearances, makeup, his scary voice, and the right time, and the typical poses of a master, while that of Tim Curry was able to scare being a Berk. Be able to recreate the adaptation of a book more than 1,000 pages is not certainly a simple thing, which is why the filmmaker focused mainly on the Loser Club. Despite the commitment to create this movie, it's still difficult justice on the King's novel, so there are differences, even if minimal, between romance and movie. We can start with the interaction of the monster, both in the movie that in the novel. The clown changes his aspect according to the child comes in contact with. For example, the scenes where Bill sees the ghost of his little brother. Some of the scenes that changes are, for example, the Mike's history, the little colored child who in the movie lost both of his parents in a terrible fire, while in the romance is dad still alive. While Harry Bowers, the school bully, who under the influence of the clown kills his father and his best friends and then dies during a fight with Mike. In the romance he is still alive, but he will be convicted and locked in a rubber room for murder his father and the disappearance of the other children. In conclusion, I think that the message of the filmmaker and especially of the writer want to send is that the whole comes from fear. The final setup that changes shape, the dress up in weakness and violence. Together with the fear how Holly King can tell, we deal with issues that certainly don't age: bullying, racism, domestic and family violence. All issues that the author photograph with genuine realism and that filtered through the eyes of young teenagers. Both the adults and guys behave in worse way for fear of not being accepted, understand each other, fear of disease, the loss of a child, etc. It teaches us that nobody is perfect, that each one of us can have its littleness and weakness. But if we stay together can be addressed and overcome, and above all, that love, friendship, and all positive things give the strength to move on. It, in fact, shall not be considered a scary movie, but unscare, and that is why the Muschietti victory isn't give us the creeps every time that Pennywise appears in scene, but get us empathizing with a handful of losers who fighting the clown actually are fighting against yourself. This message that is given to the children should be put into practice by adults too, making the world a more peaceful and beautiful place without all this hate and violence. I choose it as a movie and a romance to analyze because despite being a scary movie, a kind however not appreciated by everybody, in reality should be seen the same, because it makes you realize the real horror is inside those people who don't know how to answer to the hate with love, to fear with brave, and to disappointment with hope.